Okay, welcome everyone. We'll call to order our regular meeting of council and start by recognizing that we are meeting today on the unceded territories of the Sechot and Huipachesset First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to add from councillors? Councillor Solda.
It's not a late item, Madam Mayor. It's just we need to change the pictures behind you on the wall. There is just a quick thing. Note.
Thank you. Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have tried to get one, but apparently it is not ready for circulation yet and will be coming to us soon.
Thank you very much. Any late items from staff?
Nothing for us, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And we have minutes from the special meeting held at noon and the regular meeting held at 2 p.m. on April 24th, 2023, as well as the special meeting held at 5:30 p.m. on April 25th. Move to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Dame. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, unopposed. And we'll move on to public input period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council, and we take a maximum of 4 speakers for up to 3 minutes each. Would anybody like to speak today? Mr. McCruer. And when you come forward, if you don't mind just introducing yourself, please.
My name is Mr. McCruer, and I live at 4728 Southgate Road, and you can call me Sandy. This afternoon, I want to have a short talk about urban forestry. I know it's not something that's been on you guys' radar because there's nothing on, when I searched urban forest planning on the website. So here we go. I have to read it because I can't talk good. Most people are unaware that there are about 90 hectares or 230 acres along the southeast edge of the city that's undeveloped and owned by the city. There are trails all through it. They're heavily used by local residents. The property serves as a buffer to the industrial forest land beyond it. And it's getting on for 100 years old for the most part. It's surveyed into city lots. A few of those lots are privately owned, but for the most part, it's all owned by the city and zoned in the nebulous future residential. Residents need to know if this will be continuing. Another point too, this is all about a need to have an official community plan, urban plan. Sorry, I'm not at my best today. To have an urban forest strategy is what it's all about. And also pursuant to that, we have the Seton Park, Somas Park, and Paper Mill Dam. They're all part of the city, but they're all outside the city. I think that's pretty strange, actually. And I'm just wondering if they are being included in part of the official community plan. Now you have also Roger Creek, and it's a major forested area with extensive official and unofficial trails through it, a troubling fire history, a decadent deciduous forest, and failed salmon enhancement project. Elsewhere, there's invasive ivy overrunning many parks in many areas of the city. Currently, the only management I can see is to cut dangerous trees and weed whack where things are getting a little overgrown. But there is a requirement in the official community plan to include targets for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the area covered by the plan, and policies and actions the local government proposed with respect to achieving those targets. To me, part of that means to increase the amount of standing forest not only on the city, but on other public land and on private land as well, in a community effort perhaps. You may think it odd for a town such as ours to create an urban forest plan or strategy, or however you want to call it, when there's an abundance of forest around us already. But you have to consider a few things. Some people have mobility issues. They can't get out as much. Some people feel safer when they aren't out in the wilderness. Our demographics are going to change over the next few years. Not only are we going to see a further exodus from our cities, but we're also going to be getting refugees, I imagine. The Canadian government says we're going to be getting 1 million people next year. That's a lot of people. And they're not all going to go into cities. Our town will grow. And that means more people in the forest, more pressure on the trails, erosion, toilets, signage, safety, security. And there's other communities ahead of us. Parksville has an urban forest strategy. I saw it last night on the internet. Nanaimo's urban forest strategy is 13 years old. So even if a plan or a strategy is not incorporated into the next official community plan, there needs to be some kind of a commitment to creating one for a given time period, within a given time period. I think it's high time. I think there are things that need to be done. You have in Roger Creek, for instance, you have a burned over side hill that is on a steep slope that is open to erosion and even sloughing. And there's no trees on it. All the trees and the roots that hold the soil together were either burned first off, and then the dangerous trees were cut down. And as far as I know, there's no plan for it. You had a really good person in Amy Needham, and you guys let her slip through your fingers. She was a good person. She knew her stuff. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Mr.
All right.
McCruer, and appreciate you bringing that. You're aware, of course, that our OCP is in process of being updated right now.
It's slow and painful.
Yes, it sure is. But we want to make sure that it's done right, and we want to make sure that we take into consideration these types of requests as we're
Yeah.
moving forward as well. So
Well, I wanted to be on the committee, but I wasn't chosen, so I thought, well, I'll do an end run.
absolutely.
And here I am. Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. McCruer, for bringing that
Okay.
forward, and there may be more discussion about it if anyone wishes to make a notice of motion later in the meeting or have a conversation and then bring it back in the
Okay.
future as well.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
At this time.
Are there other members of the public who would like to speak at public input today? Come on forward.
Hi, my name is Joseph Laskosic. I live here in Port Alberni. And just want to mention again something that came up at the last Committee of the Whole meeting, and that was regarding the council procedures amendments. And you guys are going to be voting on that today. And wow, got a bit of an echo there. So just to bring that up again, I hope you don't vote in favor of that. And I think the main was removing the public input period was part of that and moving it over to the Committee of the Whole. And I would like to see, hopefully, the majority of you vote in favor of not doing that. Again, just to keep it so there's potential for public to have the input, especially something that can be, I don't think the Committee of the Whole meetings are recorded or shown online, I don't think. Are they? Okay, good, thank you. So there's that too. But just to keep all the doors open, it's not a big thing. It doesn't take a lot of time at the first part of a meeting. I don't think it is going to interfere with business that much. And yeah, it's just in the couple things he mentioned, the gentleman, I can't remember who was helping put this all together, and he had mentioned a couple things from teenager to adult and from democracy to efficiency. Democracy is messy sometimes, and sometimes it does create its own problems, but I'm glad we have it. And so the more we lean that way to include people, the greatest opportunity to have part of the process of making decisions, I think the better. So hopefully you guys take that all in consideration when you're voting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak today? Okay, then we'll move on to delegations, and we will go to our CAO for an introduction of our new corporate officer.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'd like to introduce our new interim corporate officer, Donna Monteith, sorry. Well, I got it wrong a little bit. Would you like to come up to the mic and introduce yourself to the community?
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Fox. Yes, I've been working in local government for almost 15 years in a variety of positions, corporate officer, and most recently the CFO for the District of Ucluelet. And particularly happy to be in Port Alberni. My partner is born and raised here, so we're very happy to be here, and I thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, and welcome to the community. And we are always excited to have somebody who really wants to be in this community and has a connection to it. So looking forward to working with you. Okay, we'll move on to no unfinished business today. So on to staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated May 8th, 2023 be received and checks numbered 152653 to 152740 and inclusive in payment of accounts totaling $1,048,920.39 be approved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Patola. Any comments or questions? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And on to item number 2, our CMP department report. We'll welcome Inspector Rochette.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. Got a lot of paperwork here, just give me a second. So I'm just gonna go over the crimes stats for the first 3 months of 2023. I'll make some comments in regards of some of the changes at the detachment, as well as I did some comparison numbers between our detachment and the rest of the detachment within the Island District. So, first quarter of the year, we received 3,057 calls for service. 2,500 of these calls occurring within the city of Port Alberni. The number of criminal offenses are down by 5% compared to the same quarter last year, as well as property offenses are down by 8%. And unfortunately, break and enter reports are up by 15% compared to the same quarter last year. The number of domestic reports are down by 12% if you compare it to the first 3 months of 2022. So as I mentioned, violent crime, what we've seen so far is 135 calls for service compared to 131 last year. So basically the same. We've seen a reduction of 8% when we look at property crime, from 387 to 357. Other criminal code remain fairly the same, 249 to 257. Drug offenses, 12 to 13. When I look at drug offenses, it's all related to possession for the purpose of trafficking. Total criminal code, we've seen a reduction of 5%, as I mentioned earlier, from 799 to 762. And criminal traffic has remained basically the same from 29 to 32. Now, if we break down a bit more, when we look at the violent crime, assaults have gone down from 85 to 69, which is a reduction of 19%. Harassment have gone up quite a bit from 6 to 22. What we've seen so far, like in regards to that increase of 6 to 22, mainly related to online issues of harassment, receiving emails, unwanted emails. It seems to be in a rise for sure. Robbery, 1 to 2. Sex offenses, which include sexual interference, sexual assault. We've seen a reduction of 60% from 15 to 6 reports for the first quarter of 2023. Uttering threats, seen an increase from 23 to 32, which is an increase of 39%. And like I mentioned earlier, domestic violence report have gone down from 42 to 37. When I mentioned 37, obviously, the 37 is included within the 69 reports of assault. So like more than approximately 60% of our reports of assault are domestic violence related. When you look at property crime, auto theft has slightly gone down from 9 to 6. Bike theft, 8 to 2. Now, if you look at break and enter, I mentioned that we've seen a rise in break and enter, mainly when it comes to break and enter the business from 7 to 11. Break and enter the residence, 6 to 8. But we've seen a reduction of break and enter other, which is a garage or a shed, from 7 to 4, for a total of 23 compared to the same quarter last year, which was 20. Mischief to property, which is vandalism, basically remained the same from 177 to 181. If you compare the previous year, the number is fairly high. Theft, 64 to 71. Possession of stolen property have slightly gone down from 4 to 3. We've seen a reduction of shoplifting from 48 to 30. Theft from vehicles is extremely low for the quarter, from 24 to 17. And we've as well seen a reduction of fraud reports from 29 to 21. Cause disturbance, again, a reduction from 107 to 83, which is more in line with what we've seen historically in regards to the first quarter. Breach probation from 14 to 8. But as you're going to see, there's a reduction. The number is quite low, but if you look at breach of bail, number has gone up by 49% from 43 to 64. I've mentioned it before, it's mainly related to the fact that we've been aggressive in focusing on prolific offender, making sure they comply with their bail release conditions, especially curfew. So, and that's explained the 49% increase in calls for service in regards to breach of bail. As far as comments in regards of what I pulled some numbers in relation to the Port Alberni RCMP detachment, which obviously is a mix of city and regional district, but approximately 80% of calls for service are within the city limits. But I get a report from the crime analyst from district just to get some comparison between the detachment and the other island district RCMP detachments. And so what I've seen in the first quarter is for the Port Alberni RCMP detachment, we've seen a decrease in property crime of 9%. When you look at the island district in total, they've seen a slight increase of 0.2%. Total criminal code for us has gone down by 7%, while within the island district it's remained the same. And person violent crime, we've seen a decrease of 4% for the detachment, but within the island district we've seen a decrease as well, but only of 2%. So as you can see, all the numbers is quite positive for the first quarter in comparison to previous years, as well as in comparison to other RCMP detachment within Island District. We were fortunate enough to finally find a member to staff our youth officer position. Unfortunately, that position had been vacant for almost 2 years. So we have Constable Chibukova that just started. She's been with us for a couple of years, but she started in a new position a few days ago, so May 1st. So she's well known at the high school already. She spent a lot of time as a volunteer there, so she knows a lot of the kids and well received, and looking forward to work with her and working with a different organization in relation to youth and high school and all the schools in the school district as well. On a note, a couple months ago, so February 14 and 15, so Port Alberni Detachment has been identified as a detachment for a project in relation to improving frontline responses to mental health calls for service. It's obviously, unfortunately, related to our ratio calls for service with the mental health component related to calls for service. So within Port Alberni, 9 to 10% of our calls for service have a mental health component. So as requested by us, as well as to review of our statistics from the division, we were provided this 2-day training So we had Dr. Longman, which is I'm sure you all know, came to the detachment and presented all the officers and discussed process for apprehension of the Mental Health Act, as well as I know that sometimes there's frustration from the members when they bring someone to the hospital. If they get apprehended, would they stay? Would they get released? And just to make sure that there's no miscommunication, Dr. Longman really went through the process and the way it works when we bring a client to the hospital, the assessment process and the way things are done and the flow. We had as well some specialized officers from E-Division that came and discussed this entire project and what different things we could do better, and obviously mainly related to communications. And the other aspect of this project is because our numbers, so unfortunately they're a little bit dated, but what they use is the stats from 2020, and approximately 10% of our calls for service in 2020 had a mental health component. So it put us in a status, or the numbers are high enough for us to start having conversation with the local health authority, like VIA and any other stakeholders in relation to maybe creating a position specific to dealing with mental health calls for service. What you've seen in Vancouver, what they started maybe a year ago in Nanaimo, and the officer involved with the program in Nanaimo was the training as well, so provided some of his insight in regards to that. And so the plan is for us to probably in late summer, early fall, put a business case together and maybe apply for a position in relation to that and see if we can get a support worker that can go and patrol with officers. So it's a long and lengthy process, but this was the first step, and it was important for us to get support from a division, which we received a couple months ago, so we're going to move forward with that. That's it from me, so I'm open to questions, concerns, comments.
Thank you very much, Inspector Rochette, and thank you for that update and for all the work that you guys have been doing. And nice to see the numbers trending downward, at least, and specifically in relation to other communities. It is always nice to know what's happening island-wide. I just want to really speak to the creation of position for a support worker and really offer support. And this is something that I know we've brought to the province before, and I know that myself and as well the Director Jack at the regional district, chair of the regional district, would really be happy to be a part of those pushes to the province to request that position be added in our community. So when you do get to that point and you have the business case, please keep us in the loop, and we'll support in whatever way we can. Yeah, 10% of our calls is a massive amount, and it just really, I think at the end of the day, it's about serving people as best we can with the right type of support wherever possible and aligning that. So really happy to hear that the RCMP is leading that process. And I know we've seen success with other programs like this in other communities. And I'm sure Councillor Douglas would like to speak to this also.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And through you to Inspector Rochette. Thanks for being here. And we had the fortunate occasion of having a conversation just prior to this. And as some of you may know, I sit on the board of Canadian Mental Health BC Division, and they have a number of pilot projects that are underway in Victoria, West Vancouver, New Westminster, along the same lines as what you're talking about. But I wasn't aware, and it's really handy to know that Port Alberni has that increased incidence of mental health calls as compared to other communities. So I was just wondering if you would mind if we do have a delegation coming up in the fairly near future with the CEO of Canadian Mental Health BC Division. And what I'd like to do, with your permission, is connect him with yourself, so he can let you know about the other programs they have going and see if there's an option of amalgamating some of those as well.
No, absolutely. Especially if there's already something in place that we can maybe adjust for us, so that would make the process easier and probably quicker, for sure.
Great, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Inspector Rochette, I just want to thank you and the other members of the attachment for the excellent work that you do in our community. being an RCMP officer is not easy these days, as you've alluded to. There's a lot of mental health calls, and that takes a very specialized training in order to deal with those calls. But I never have heard any complaints about any officer in this community. So I think just that fact alone really speaks a lot to the good work that you do. So please express my thanks and appreciation to your staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Will do for sure.
Thank you. Other comments from councillors? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your report. Would somebody like to move receipt? Moved by councillor Mealy, seconded by councillor Dame. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on to bylaws, and item number 1 today is tax rate bylaw number 5083, 2023, and this is final adoption. Councillor Solda, would you like to read this?
Yep. Okay, so Madam Mayor, I move that, okay, so number 1, tax rate, okay, that the City of Port Alberni tax rates bylaw number 5083, 2023 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5083.
Thank you. Moved by councillor Solda, seconded by councillor Douglas. Not seeing any comments on the motion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And big thank you to our finance department and our director of finance for all the work that went into the budget this year. I know it was an incredible amount of work to make things, to make it work in such a challenging inflation year. Moving on to item number 2, Council Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 5082, 2023. And we'll go to our corporate officer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the report before council provides introduction of the Council Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 5082 and requests consideration of first reading. On March 23rd, council undertook a facilitated workshop to discuss the Council Code of Conduct and Procedures Bylaw, of which a draft policy and bylaw were presented at the April 25th Committee of the Whole. Recommendations from the Committee of the Whole have been brought forward within the bylaw for council's consideration. Based on the discussions at the Committee of the Whole, staff have also included further potential recommendations that council may wish to consider prior to further readings, which I would be pleased to review should council wish.
Thank you very much. Would somebody like to move first reading to start? Councillor Douglas.
I'd like to make a motion that Council Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 5082 2023 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Moved by councillor Douglas, seconded by councillor Haggard. Discussion. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to make a motion to refer the matter of the council procedure bylaw amendments to a select committee to be known as the Council Procedure Bylaw Review Committee, and with the following terms of reference. And for council's assistance, I've provided written copies of this to each member of council. So with the following terms of reference. 1, the committee shall be comprised of 3 councillors, 3 members of the public, and either the CAO or the corporate officer of the city. 2, the committee members shall be selected on or before June 12th, 2023. 3, the committee shall meet on at least 2 occasions or more as the committee determines is necessary. 4, the committee shall be empowered to seek such further input or guidance as the committee determines is necessary. And 5, the committee will report to council on their progress on July 12th, 2023 at the scheduled city council meeting. Such report may be either interim or final.
Thank you. Seconded by councillor Solda. Okay, discussion on the motion to defer. Councillor Patola?
Madam Mayor, point of order, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely.
I apologize. We have a motion on the floor already. Does this motion to defer overtake that?
It does. So this is to handle the motion that is on the floor. It would be to defer it. Thank you for checking. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I can speak to the motion, I am going to do so from the podium. Thank you, Madam Mayor. In speaking to the motion from the podium, I stand here because this podium has a slightly different perspective than sitting there. This perspective is one where the speaker is able to see all of council and our staff as public servants. And I'm sure that this is a view that council shares. But I know that in following the necessity of balancing our expediency with engagement of the public, we also must practice to be careful we don't become public masters. This is the balance that was referred to by Mr. Jerry Berry at our last session, and he's the individual who assisted us in developing the Code of Conduct. Now, strangely, it was from that discussion about the Code of Conduct that produced the changes to the procedural bylaw. We were looking at greater engagement and professionalism with the council, and somehow we've moved towards expressing the need for expediency. I think those are strong objectives, and I think those are objectives that all of council agrees on. But in my opinion, the proposed amendments may have missed the mark. So previously, at our last meeting, I delivered a train analogy about bringing the public on board with decisions of council. And if you'll excuse the pun, it seems that analogy failed to gain traction, or perhaps it already left the station. What we haven't agreed on is the method that best meets the objectives that we all know are important, that balance between expediency and engagement. And I note in the report that the suggested changes are referred to as best practices. And I commend staff for taking the effort to find those best practices amongst communities within this province. That does not necessarily mean that they are the best practices for us in Port Alberni. And thus, my motion is to create the select committee and involve members of the community in deciding how we can best attain those objectives. So this isn't a free-for-all, but this is valuing the input from the professionals, from the council, and from other members of society. Why should we be doing this? Well, later on today, we'll be voting on the Code of Conduct. That was the purpose that started this whole ball rolling. So the Code of Conduct is a reflection of the oath of office, one that each member of council has sworn to. And that in that swearing, we swear to being accountable for decisions and actions, to integrity, and to demonstrating leadership and collaboration. The Code of Conduct expands on what those things mean. Leadership and collaboration means to lead, listen to, and positively influence others. Respect means regard for other perspectives. Integrity means to behave in a manner that promotes public confidence in all dealings. And the example of accountability that's in the Code of Conduct says members will listen to and consider the opinions and needs of the community in all decision-making and allow for appropriate opportunities for discussion and feedback. As I read the changes to the procedure bylaw, it seems to me that, again, we've missed the mark because we're taking away opportunities for engagement, which may be very good plans for streamlining, but we're failing to replace those opportunities for engagement somewhere else. And that really is what I believe the public has been asking for, and we have failed to listen to. So I would like to share a story which I've found helpful in guiding my life, and perhaps everyone here in the room will find it helpful too. This is a story by Dr. Seuss called Horton Hatches an Egg. And we all know the lovable Horton because Horton was the one who heard the Who. And we all know who the Whos are because they're the ones who helped the Grinch's heart grow 3 times. Well, in this story, Horton gets up to some other mischief. Horton is asked by Daisy May, a bird, to sit on her egg while she takes a break. And Horton does. Now, Daisy May, as soon as she gets away, swears she's never going back. She's on Palm Beach. But throughout the story, we see that Horton sits on that egg through the winter and the freezing cold, through storms, through his friends coming to say, don't sit on that egg anymore, you're an elephant, you look ridiculous. And Horton's response is always the same. Horton says, I'll stay on this egg. I won't let it freeze. I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant is faithful, 100%. I read that to you because if we pass the code of conduct later on today and do not act in a manner pursuant to that when we approach the procedure bylaw reading and the input from the community, then we're acting like a Daisy May and not like a Horton. We're not doing what we said. And alternately, if we're not going to do what we said, then I would encourage all of council to vote against the code of conduct. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Regardless of where this discussion goes, I think I might make an amendment to the procedures bylaw that councillors be required to stay in their chairs and not speak from the podium. But recognizing that is not currently in our procedures bylaw. Thank you. Discussion on the motion to defer. Councillor Dane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the chair, I think I very much appreciate the sentiment that Councillor Patola has brought forward and the point of the responsibility that we have to make sure that we are giving the public ample opportunity to engage. I think that the intent and the spirit of the changes that have been made are not to avoid public engagement. I think that they are to put public engagement in its most effective place. Now, where I do agree is that it's unfortunate to remove without proving what we're going to replace it with, as in we haven't put anything concrete in place, as in this is what's going to be in place of it. And that's going to be challenging for those who are frustrated to see what's been taken away. So having said all that, I have to admit that I am torn, and I'm hoping to hear from my fellow councillors on their thoughts, because I do think that potentially a committee could be, a select committee could be a valuable thing, but I also hesitate to drag this out and have this. I think that we can meet our objectives without this. I think that we can pass this and that we can put further opportunities for the public to engage in place and prove our original intent without this. So, thank you.
Thank you. And hearing, I think, your concern regarding removing an opportunity for public input without adding one back in, I think it's important to remind council that the policy that's in front of us is a draft. And so if council wanted to not remove public input, for instance, because that is the piece that we're talking about removing here, everything else is just shifting slightly in how we conduct it. If council wanted to not remove public input period, that is an easy amendment to the procedures bylaw that we have in front of us. So I think if that is an overarching concern until we have something else in place, that's an easy amendment for us to make, for sure. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I concur with most of what Councillor Dame just uttered, and really appreciate once again the dynamic presentation and the value of what Councillor Patola brought forth. As you know, the input period was brought to us, I believe, in 2012. And it's proven its worth by the attention that people have paid to it today from our audience and within our council. But I think, as Councillor Dame said, it can prove its value in an alternative place. And the way I view this is it's a refinement. We're trying to enhance the sort of business aspect of our actual council meeting to get through material efficiently and effectively, and shift this to the committee of the whole sector. And I think that's well worth a try. I have no concerns whatsoever about endorsing the previous motion made prior to this. I think it's a very valuable thing for us to work at to improve our model. We never are static. We never get to a model that never will need refining or changing, just like communities always need refining and changing. And you know, we can always come back and refine this again, as I'm sure we will. But as I see from this perspective, I'm perfectly happy with moving ahead with the original motion as it was. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do apologize for not coming to the last meeting, and it is difficult to speak over Zoom, and I did have some flu-induced brain fog as well. So if I could bring up a couple points, it seems to me like the two contentious issues were the public input period and the question period. So one point that wasn't brought up during the committee of the whole meeting was that people have abused the public input period part of our council meetings. The people that spoke here today I have a lot of respect for, and they're fantastic, and the majority of the people are. But there has been instances where people have used public input to try and move forward their political agenda, such as during COVID. There's been times when during public input period where people have come forward, have been threatening and very abusive to council, to the point where I have been felt very unsafe being in here. As a result of those instances, we had to do a violence risk assessment, and now as a result of that assessment, we will be doing renovations to council chambers. So in case there is a violent instance, we have to ability to leave quickly and safely. So that is my concern. And during question period, there is a lot of other ways to ask questions of council in the city other than coming forward at a council meeting. We do have a new system in place where questions that reach the city are moved forward to the appropriate department very quickly and very efficiently. And our new CEO so far has answered any inquiries and questions very quickly to the people of the public. So we're not cutting off questions for the public, we're just moving it to a more streamlined fashion. So I hope those 2 points make sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Solta.
So I just want to go back to the public. Sometimes the public comes here so the other people in the public, in our community, can hear their questions, their thoughts, because it might not be something someone knows, right? And then you're asked about it and then you go, whoa, didn't you see it at council meeting? You can answer. So I just have, that's my thing. I think it needs to come back, and that they can come up and ask a question. When it goes to staff and that, it doesn't get out there, and people need to hear it because there's other people asking the same question, but they don't want to come to council. They get the answer, and yeah, I just think it needs to come back, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So again, just a reminder that we absolutely can still make amendments to the proposed bylaw in front of us. So if there are specific pieces that councillors would like to change, if this motion is defeated, there would be an opportunity for amendments to be made. For myself personally, I do not support the motion to defer. A part of the motion says with the following terms of reference. However, I would say that the 5 points below do not, in my opinion, are not a terms of reference. I think it's important when you have a terms of reference or when you have a select committee and members of the public are included in that, that you have a very clear scope of work that will be reviewed so that members of the committee, both councillors and members of the public, work within a specific range of amendments. As it's written currently, it would include our entire procedures bylaw. And another thing that's of concern to me is there's not a mention of who would facilitate this work, and we don't have a budget to have a facilitator at this point. Certainly haven't identified a budget. So I think that without a facilitator, without a very clear scope of work, this committee could come back with things that are completely undoable, I would say, first of all. council went through a process. We, and you know, it was said at our last, committee of the whole regarding this topic, Mr. Barry said that on every kind of where are we on the spectrum question that was put up, council was actually quite aligned. I think that we are the ones who have an understanding of the structure of council meetings, of what we're trying to achieve. While it would be nice, I think, from some members of the public's perspective to have council meetings be fully members of the public getting up, giving input on things, it wouldn't necessarily work with what the function of council is in these meetings. So I think that we have the best understanding of what our actual role is. I think we've been through a process. I think we were very reasonably aligned on the outcomes we were trying to achieve. And I think that this committee, especially without a clear scope, without a budget, and without a facilitator, would likely take us back in that work. So I personally have some amendments I would like to see to the terms of reference, but I don't think that a committee will take us closer or will actually continue this work in a productive way, and there's not a clear kind of understanding of what we're trying to achieve with a committee. So I won't support the motion as it's currently written to defer. Are there any other comments? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure whether the rules allow a final rebuttal on a motion to defer or not. But if you allow it, I have some comments.
Yeah, I think you can continue speaking, just we haven't limited speakers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few points to clarify, and not pointing fingers at anybody, but just comments that were made. Councillor Dame referred to not wanting to drag out this process, and I would agree, but there certainly is no urgency in this process. As Councillor Douglas said, this is a living document. It's been alive since the 20-teens in any event, and continues to evolve. And certainly by doing half of a job now, we are dragging it out because we're waiting till sometime in the unknown future to add in how public engagement will act in the committee of the whole. As Councillor Douglas suggested, we should be moving that public engagement period to committee of the whole, and that certainly is something that I would expect a special committee or select committee to advise on or suggest. And the only other comment that I would make is that I disagree with Madam Mayor's comments with regards to the scope and the facilitator. The scope, as set out in our current procedures bylaw for select committees, is determined by the nature of the matter referred to it. And the matter being referred to it are the specific amendments being suggested in this package. They are not the entire bylaw, but they are the specific amendments in this package. And the facilitator certainly would be possibly not a facilitator, not worded that way, but certainly included either the CAO or the corporate officer who is the city professional in this area. So those are my comments. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I just want to clarify with our corporate officer the public input piece, because as it is currently written, I believe it is moving to committee of the whole. So I think there's a misunderstanding here that it's being deleted and not replaced, but it is intended to be replaced.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At present, there is public input period at the Committee of the Whole, and the only change that came out of the recommendations from the Committee of the Whole was to actually have the initial wording proposed that the public input period focused only on items that were on the agenda, and Council directed that that actually be opened up. So it was further opened to have that at the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. So I think that what we talked about at our last meeting, where there was, where the comment about additional opportunities for members of the public to engage was outside of our procedures bylaw. We talked about different types of meetings or different types of coffee with council and that type of thing. So I believe, Councillor Dame, that's what your comment was referring to. But Committee of the Wholes would absolutely have that public input period. And as Councillor Mealy moved last time, it would be open to whatever topic a member of the public chose to bring forward. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I remember correctly, one of the reasons that we made some of these changes is we've heard a lot of people come forward and say they're very uncomfortable coming to a council meeting and speaking to council. It's very intimidating, and I'm sorry if we feel intimidating because we're really nice people. But so we're trying to think of ways to have public input and have people come forward and be able to speak in a less formal process. So that's one of the reasons we made these changes, not that we didn't want public input. We certainly do, but we want to be able to have people come forward and speak and feel more comfortable speaking to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final comments on the motion to defer? Okay. Seeing none on the motion to defer, all in favor? Opposed? Motion defeated. Okay, so the original motion, which is first reading, is remains on the floor. So if anyone has amendments they would like to make, now would be the time. And I do have a couple. So the first one, since I see no hands, the first one would be, I'd like to amend that public input period at committee of the wholes, the time limit be increased to 5 minutes. And if I can get a seconder, I will explain. Seconded by Councillor Mealy. I think 3 minutes seems like enough time. However, I'm the one that's timing, and often members of the public get up and are uncomfortable and take a little bit of time to get to the point where they're able to say what they came to say. And I know Mr. McCruer today said, I have it written down, Shari, so I hope that we'll be, I'll stay under the 3 minutes, but if I don't, please be nice. And I think that 3 minutes is actually a difficult amount of time to say something in. So I think giving 2 extra minutes, we can always make a motion just to give someone a little bit of extra time, but I think it kind of takes that pressure off. It does make it a little bit more friendly and comfortable so that members of the public don't have to feel like they have to come with something and get right to the point and just read through it without being able to add anything as they're thinking. Any comments on that? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also agree, and it definitely goes back to having people being invited here and the ability to, like you said, not rush through it. I've had the wonderful honor to work under 3 good mayors, under Mayor Trumper, Mayor Donna Brett in between, and Mayor Ken McCrae. And I love the fact that you're on that same pathway. There's not a hard and fast, let the people have their say, and to know when to say when goes back to Councillor Haggard's comments of people taking advantage of the situation. I think you do a great job, Madam Mayor. So extending it to 5 minutes and letting the people speak, and I have all the trust in you to mediate that properly.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Has it been seconded?
It has, by Councillor Mealy.
So I would fully support the extension to 5 minutes. And just so I don't offend anyone, I think this should be a separate motion, but I will be making a separate motion to expand the number of speakers as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, so on the, this is an amendment to the motion, to the first reading, on the amendment to increase public input period at committee of the whole to 5 minutes. All in favor? Carried, none opposed. And Councillor Patola?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to make a motion to amend the motion by changing the number of speakers allowable at the public input period at committee of the whole to 6 speakers, which would then allow for a total of 30 minutes with the recent amendment.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Comments? Okay, I just want to comment that I think that what we're trying to achieve here is a more kind of free discussion in committee of the whole. So I think that this would achieve that. One clarification I would like to make, and I'm not sure if it's written in our bylaw or not, I don't think it is that a member of the public could only speak at public input period 1 time. Because what we don't want is that to be taken up by 30 minutes by one person getting up. So I'm not sure if that's written in or if that would need to be an amendment. Okay. Then I will amend the amendment to clarify that a member of the public could only speak during one of those periods.
Agreed as much as I can.
Okay. Wonderful, so that's moved and seconded. So we're going to first have a vote on the amendment to the amendment, which is the one-time amendment on the motion, on the amendment. All in favor? Carried. And any more comments on the whole amendment? Okay, seeing none, so this is to increase to 6 people, with each person just being able to speak one time on the amendment. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is kind of becoming piecemeal, which was what the idea I had before was to avoid, but here we go. I would also like to add to that same section that reflects the number of speakers at the public input period for the committee of a whole, to add the phrase that the ability to speak is limited to residents and taxpayers of the city of Port Alberni.
Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Comments? Councillor Haggard.
I believe that you're not required to give your address according to our procedures bylaws, so you'd have to make other changes in addition to this. You're only required to state your name at this point.
The only thing that I think of when I hear this is specifically John Maba, who is, he might be a taxpayer, I don't know, but he's not a resident. He's a resident of the Alberni Valley. However, he is incredibly active in the Cycle Alberni community. He's brought really good feedback to us representing that group. And he is not a resident. I think his input is valuable. I do think it is important for us to know if we're hearing from resident taxpayers or outside areas who just want us to pay for everything and are not participating in paying for it. I'm not sure if there's a different way to achieve that, but I would feel slightly uncomfortable limiting that only people who are taxpayers or residents were able to speak. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With a further motion to be made in the future, amending the matters, I was going to move that the delegations also be removed from the council meetings agendas and placed into the committee of the whole agendas. And individuals such as Mr. Maba, who I know brings valuable information, could be appearing easily as a delegation or any other individual from outside of the city.
Okay, further comments on this? Councillor Haggard.
We have 3 councillors here who are not residents of the city of Port Alberni, so that seems a little absurd to me when we don't let members of the public speak if they're not residents.
Councillor Solda.
But this councillor who lives out Beaver Creek owns 2 properties in Port Alberni, the city.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I live in the city. I find the example you made of Mr. Maba is a good one, and I think, I can't think of groups right now, but I think we could easily find a large number of groups of people who would, you know, find it advantageous to come and appear in the input period. You know, to appear as a delegation requires pre-planning, submission of forms and all that kind of stuff. The public input period is a lot more flexible, and it may be that somebody from Ducks Unlimited or Salmon Enhancement or from the McLean Mill Hatchery, or, you know, somebody wants to just to come and appear and talk about an event they're having in the public input session to let us know about it, and for us to shut them down because maybe that particular presenter doesn't live in the city. I think we might lose something there, and I don't think, you know, I don't think we have like a train, to use your analogy, a trainload of people trying to sneak in here to appear, you know, when they're not residents of the city. I think for the most part, people are going to be from the city. So again, it's sort of like a little bit of flexibility we have there. So although I appreciate Councillor Patola's input, and I've felt in a similar way in the past at times, but I've always sort of seemed to come down more on the side of, you know, if we get one person here from outside of the city who's abusing it, we'd probably get a dozen people from outside of the city that have a really good, valid reason to just come and speak for a few minutes about something that's going on in our valley. That's the way I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will admit, this is something that I've struggled with since my re-election here is not knowing the address of the people speaking merely because I'm not here because of this residents of Beaver Creek, Cherry Creek, Sprout Lake and above and beyond. That doesn't mean that it's not important to us. Obviously, we're supposed to be the stewards of the whole valley and take the information in and do as we please. So I understand 100% why Councillor Petola's motion is like this, because we want to listen to our constituents first. Simple as that. I haven't had a way to figure out how to do that. And like I said, now we're getting even more lenient on not even asking for an address, which is totally fine. And I've said that. Maybe the suggestion is, I would like to hear from the taxpayers and the citizens that live within the community first. It doesn't mean that the people in the outlying areas aren't important. And like you said, Mr. Maba is a prime example. I would never not listen to Mr. Maba and what he has to say. So that is my struggle right now. I think what I've done personally is just take the comments and if someone says, okay, that person lives out in the regional district, okay, well then I still have to listen to my people first. It's as simple as that. I just don't know if we can put it down and have it be effective within council. So I think it's on council, each individual councillor and the mayor to vet that information for themselves, I guess, at this point, so.
Thank you. I think that's a really good comment, and I wonder if the shift in this could just be, since it has been our practice to have people state their address, however, it wasn't in our procedures bylaw. At some point, it was changed. I wonder if the shift would be to just have them say either resident of the city of Port Alberni or the electoral area that they live in, or outside of, but that be what we ask of them so that we're aware we still allow them to speak. Because I agree, we should listen to taxpayers and city residents first. However, we don't know who we're listening to if we don't get that information. So it's not about not allowing them to speak, it's about, and I think asking for an address is, in today's world, just not really appropriate. Even asking for the street they live on, to me, feels not appropriate, but asking for your area of residence might just solve that. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That was the suggestion that I was about to make, actually. But I do have another part to it as well. More so for consideration. I'm not even exactly sure where I'm on it, but could we perhaps consider if, as Councillor Mealy has suggested, the goal is to hear from residents first, maybe there's a way that we can do that literally where we say at the beginning, are there any residents or taxpayers who would like to have input? And then at the end, if we still have time left, we'll put it out to anybody else.
I like that. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. There are many residents in the rural areas that have businesses within the city, though. So how do you deal with that issue? They should be allowed to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Mealy, and then Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I stated I'd like to listen to the taxpayers and the citizens of Port Alberni first. Now, and all, everybody here, who, if you own property in the city but you don't live in the city, you're still the taxpayer. That's the way I look at it. So of course, your voice is just as important as someone who physically lives within the city. So, but again, that's the struggle, is differentiating, who am I listening to? What interest do they have in the city? And do they take precedence over somebody else that is also speaking that day?
Absolutely. And if you own a business and don't own the physical location, you are still paying those taxes. And so you would still be a taxpayer. Councillor Dame.
I'm good, actually. Yeah, thanks.
So, Council, the motion we currently have is to limit to only City of Port Alberni, I believe it was taxpayers. And I'm wondering if, and Councillor Petola, I'll let you speak, but it sounds like potentially a shift to either stating residency or calling on City of Port Alberni residents and taxpayers first. And then if there are spots remaining in our 6, that we would call for speakers from outside of the City of Port Alberni. Councillor Petola, would you like to speak to that or anything else?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I think you've got it right. And instead of just limiting it to residents and taxpayers of the city of Port Alberni, what it could be phrased, if everybody's happy to change an amendment without amending it, to give priority to the residents and taxpayers of the city of Port Alberni.
Absolutely. And if you're comfortable with that just being a friendly amendment that you've made by yourself and we don't need to vote on it, that would be lovely. And I think that covers it. And then we could have a bit of further discussion about so we're stating we want to give priority to city residents and taxpayers. We can have a bit of internal dialogue about what that actually looks like in practice and develop what our process will be around it. Okay, so it sounds like there's consensus there. I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All in favor?
Oh, sorry. Can we just get the corporate officer to read out what the actual motion is now?
So this is just on the amendment, and it is to prioritize City of
Okay.
Port Alberni residents and taxpayers for public input period.
Then I'll vote yes.
Thank you. So we'll do that vote again. All in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have another amendment that I would like to move, and that is to add in section 16 sub 1 a public or a question period number 1 in the place where public input period used to be in the new amendments or the proposed bylaw amending the current bylaw.
Thank you. So for clarity, that is adding a question period at the start of a regular meeting of council where we previously had public input period. Okay. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Comments? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm just looking at it right now. So would there be a question period right before adjournment as well? So is that 2 question periods, or are we just moving? Yeah, okay, yep, thank you.
Councillor Patola, did you want to comment?
No, I was just signaling dose to my friend, Councillor Mealy. And really, I'll speak to it, Madam Mayor. The purpose is that we discussed at the Committee of the Whole last week the benefits of question period. And Madam Mayor, you eloquently pointed out that the second question period is necessary and very useful for people that may not have understood what the purpose of the decision was or what the decision was. And other speakers pointed out that a first question period would be very useful because it would allow some public input on the question that was going to be asked. And that would be the reason that I would suggest adding another question period, retaining the one already there, thus having 2 question periods that would all be bound by the same rules on question period.
Thank you. Comments? So to clarify the rules of question period that are currently in our proposed bylaw, Corporate Officer, could you maybe give us a summary of those so that we know? I'm thinking of, are there limits to the number of questions? Is there a timeline or a time limit? Is there, I'm trying to remember, can it be only items that are on the agenda? First time speaker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So currently, we have the previous question period being replaced under section 22 as follows. Number 1, at the conclusion of the proceedings of regular council meetings and committee of the whole meetings, the mayor or presiding member shall provide time for the public to ask questions of council or committee on decisions or recommendations made during the course of the meeting. 2, if an answer cannot be readily provided, the mayor or presiding member may refer the public to the appropriate department or committee for response. And the purpose of this change was to focus questions received during question period at both council and committee of the whole meetings on decisions of council during the course of the meeting.
Thank you. So my concern would be kind of process around, would we be intending to provide answers to questions at that point? I think that could add a lot of confusion to the process in our meetings because council will not have voted on those items yet. So I think it would be challenging to provide answers. It would almost lead to our staff getting up to provide answers that may be out of context with the direction council is going. So if it's a, have you thought about this? I guess my feeling is on items that are big enough to require questions from the public to help us make our decisions prior to making the decisions, they would have already come to a committee of the whole. There would have been time, where that's reported on in the media. We would have opportunity to get feedback from the community in a variety of ways as we do. And likely there would be multiple readings as well for anything that is big. So I guess I'm curious what the intent would be and how we would kind of be expected to handle that. And I'll go to Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it would be very difficult to have the question first before the actual staff report and the actual presentation from that director. And quite often council will ask questions to the director, so I feel like we're just duplicating process and adding time to the meetings, because if a member of the audience has a question, chances are it's going to be answered during that process. Thank you.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. And I feel likewise, I think we've improving the efficiency of the business model of the council meeting by shifting the input period. Now we're going to replace it with something that may even be more cumbersome. And the other aspect, apart from the good highlights that Councillor Haggard pointed out about receiving input from staff and the report and everything, is that I just don't feel that it's the right place. I mean, this sort of excessive questioning or questioning can occur in the committee of the whole, and that's what it's being designed for. And the other part is that, as was mentioned earlier, we can ask questions and answer questions and receive questions at any time. I answered a question before this meeting chatting with somebody. I answered a question yesterday when I bumped into somebody, and you know, and then of course our staff can receive questions at any point. So it's not as if the council meeting is the only place where a question can be asked. There's the whole spectrum of our time. Questions can be submitted, they can be asked. It doesn't have to be done here. So I'm not in favor of replacing the input period with an additional question period. I think it'd be more advantageous to retain it to the end and then see if we need some refinement of it at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. And I think I want to echo your comments. I'm not supportive of it at this time because I think I'm not functionally clear on how it would work. Not necessarily thinking it's not needed or relevant. So from my perspective, something to possibly come back to and give more thought to what that would look like. But at this point in time, I wouldn't support it just based on how our current question period is handled. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think clearly the intent would be that council receives the agenda, including the reports, on a Thursday afternoon, as does the rest of the public when it's posted on the website. The rest of the public could read those reports and then have questions about those reports or that are specific to this is, you know, I don't know, is this an adding error? Where do these funds come from? Have you considered has this matter gone out for tenders? Things that may or may not be questions that council would ask in any event. And certainly if they are questions that are going to be covered in any event by the report, but aren't clear in the report and are going to be covered and clarified by the presenter, then that will happen during the process of the report. But the public has an opportunity then to have those matters clarified and gain confidence that council has considered the fullest range of factual information to give an informed decision on the matter before them.
Thank you for that. I'd just like to ask for clarification from our Director of Corporate Services. Our Deputy Director of Corporate Services. If a member of the public would like to speak outside of public input period, question period, to a specific issue, from my perspective, any member of council could at any point in a meeting make a motion to allow that member of the public permission to speak or permission to ask a question. So that could, and I guess just correct me if I'm wrong on that. At the regional district, if we want to give someone permission to speak, council or the board makes a motion and we give that person permission to speak.
Madam Mayor, thank you. And I may defer to the CEO as well, but theoretically, we do not have that capability within our procedures bylaw, and we haven't historically made that possibility.
And if I may add through the chair, however, council could make a motion at any time to entertain an extra person or a question or anything the council wishes. Again, that is in council's preview. So they could do that even if it was outside of our procedures bylaw.
Thank you. And I'll go to our Deputy CAO.
Just as council is considering this, if council does wish to do that, I would ask that we have to have some clarity in there that a member of the public would not be able to ask a question of a bylaw that's on there for third reading that has had a public hearing, because that you wouldn't be allowed to engage in that conversation before you, so not to say you couldn't, this is up to council that you're able to do this, but we need to have something written in the procedures bylaw to make that an exception where they wouldn't be allowed to do that. So just.
Thank you, and I think that's important input. And I'm not at all suggesting that we add this into our procedures bylaw, merely clarifying that if there was an item that was, that was outside of the typical kind of process where a member of the public really needs to speak to something, as council, we have the ability at any point to override our procedures bylaw. It's our procedures bylaw on a one-off and allow that member of the public to speak. Typically, however, we will, if somebody is in the room and has a critically important piece of information that they would like to bring forward, then as we are walking into this room, they will ask us questions or give us their input, and that happens very regularly. And then members of council will ask those questions or look for that clarification. So I guess my point is, if there's something that's so critical that it needs to be brought forward from a member of the public, then we have the ability to allow that member of the public to speak with a council motion. I think that that is not a super typical normal thing, because usually those questions will just be asked of us and we can ask them of staff if we're unclear. So for that reason, I think at this point I don't support the motion to add the second question period. Councillor Patola, do you have another comment?
I don't think I do. Director Smith's comment is, in my understanding, already dealt with in the procedures bylaw that clarifies what is existing law in other places already anyways, that we simply can't comment on things like that because of the hearing process that exists elsewhere. I suppose that the description that you've provided is similar to our friends to the south, when certain delegates on a board will yield their floor or yield their time to another member. And so I could see that process working quite well.
Thank you very much. So the motion or amendment that we have right now is to add the second question period. I don't see any more questions or comments on that. So on that amendment, all in favor? Opposed? Motion defeated. And I have a couple more items, just smaller items, I would like to make amendments for. So the first one is I would like to make an amendment that question period, that members of the public speaking at question period be limited to 3 questions. If there's a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Solda. I'm not firm on the number 3, so if members of council would like to change that, that's perfectly fine with me. This comes from feedback that I've had from members of the public who have been waiting at question period to ask a question. And we do have some very engaged, a couple very engaged members of the public who do get up and speak, and often do speak for reasonably long periods of time at question period. I have had one member of the public say, I waited 15 minutes and the same person was still speaking, so I left. So I think that it doesn't make sense to put a time limit on question period, because we have to have time to give responses if we can. However, I think to put a limit on the number of questions that can be asked, whether that's 3 or 5 or whatever council feels is appropriate, will ensure that every member of the public who is here has the opportunity to ask questions. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I would agree wholeheartedly with regards to question period during the council meetings. And if we could specify council meetings, I don't think we need necessarily the same requirement with the nature or flavor of the committee of the whole meetings.
Thank you, and that could be a friendly amendment because that was my intent, council meeting specific. Other comments? Okay, then on the amendment, all in favor? None opposed, carried. And lastly, I would like to, there is a suggestion in here as one of the options that we consider allowing inclusion of electronic participation options for members of the public at committee of the whole meetings. So I would like to make an amendment that we add that in, electronic participation at committee of the wholes, seconded by Councillor Solda. And specifically, this is something that has always been important to me. I know that for a large part of my life with kids and everything else, it was challenging to get to council meetings. And so I think allowing people to participate, ask their questions, give their input from home is really important, and we have the technology now to do it. Any comments or questions? Councillor Mealy.
Just that Councillor Douglas is not here, but he would approve of this wholeheartedly and second it if he was here.
We'll take his approval in principle since he's left the room. Councillor Haggard.
Just to add to that, I'm wondering if it would be, if you would be open to have people email questions in during council meeting, and it can come to a live email by the corporate officer, and then she can monitor those. And in the meeting, we could say, is there any questions from the public?
Yeah,
By
similar
email?
to how we do it at the regional district and how we did it during COVID as well. When we were meeting by Zoom, we had an email council@portalberni.ca where questions were asked and they were read out at the end of the meeting. I don't think we need an amendment to that because how it's written here, inclusion of electronic participation options for members of the public at committee of the whole meetings, doesn't limit to having to voice the question versus emailing it in. So I think that that is certainly within. And again, I think that, and I'm not sure if we need to clarify this, but I think it's important that especially members of the public who are participating electronically, they need to identify themselves, and we do need to know, are you a city resident taxpayer or from outside the area? So I'm not sure I assume we don't need to add that in specifically. Great, because it's in line with everything else that we've been doing. Okay, then on that, Councillor Patola? Okay, on that amendment, all in favor? None opposed, carried, thank you. And that's all I have for amendments. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have one further amendment, and this shall be my last. Oh, no, it shan't. Sorry. I have two further amendments. I wish to add a 24 sub 4. So in the amendments currently proposed for under section 24 referrals, I wish to add a sub 4, which is the corporate officer shall keep a register of correspondence received, the department referred to, and the answer provided, and such register shall form an addendum to the published agenda for council meetings. So I know
Seconded by Councillor Mealy.
I know the corporate officer has moved to this new practice, and I think it's an excellent one. I do think, though, that at least for the sake of in writing, those materials were previously in the agenda, although they don't have to take up time in council meetings, and I think they should still be in the agenda as an addendum, as Councillor Solda's suggested, that sometimes questions that are asked prompt other thought and questions by other members of the community. So by making those inquiries available to everyone and the response as well, I think we'll be very successful without wasting any time in promoting the understanding of the community.
Thank you. I guess I'm just curious if this is actually a shift at all from what we've been doing. Because we already include it under correspondence for information. We know based on the top box with the check marks which departments it has gone to. So I guess I'm curious how the addendum would basically be any different than just having it under correspondence for information.
Well, currently, with the new process of the register of correspondence, a number of items are no longer included in the agenda.
I'm aware of that. What I'm asking, and there was reason for that, as discussed at our last meeting, items that are regarding council business come to council, and items that are operational go to staff. So that is what we were trying to move to with this. And I guess I'm just wondering, should you just remove that, like you're adding an addendum to go back to exactly what we're changing. So I guess process-wise, it doesn't make sense to me. Councillor Patola.
Well, as an addendum, it's information that is included in the agenda for the public to consume and consider. It's not anything that is officially in the agenda for council to have to spend time considering, and therefore doesn't interfere with the expediency of the meetings.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, then there would not be on the agenda an item that we would cover. It would just be pages at the end. Okay, so it's a very minor change. CAO, could you speak to functionally if there's any additional time requirement or anything, any concerns about this?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I think it would just be getting all the correspondence together and then adding it as an addendum. I would want to know, does council still want to receive that weekly as that's been happening currently? We've been sending any operational inquiries of council out on Thursdays. Would we just wait then and add it to the council agenda instead of on a weekly basis? Or are we asking to compile the 2 weeks worth and then putting that on to the next council meeting in the agenda? So just I do want to know council's intent on that.
Thank you. Comments from council? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the CAO. The intent would be to not create any more work. The intent would be to just simply provide access to the work that's already being so well done. So I would honestly be in hands of the management staff as to the process they've already undertaken to create this register and what would be the easiest way for that register to simply become available to the public.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, then on the amendment for the addendum, all in favor? Opposed? Defeated. Okay, so, oh, you had one more. Councillor Patola, or was that the last one?
I do have a housekeeping amendment, but it would be an amendment to add a new amending section to the amending bylaw. So just in my review of the current bylaw, sections 34, 35, and 46 require printed copies to be provided. I note they weren't. I don't think that that's a problem, but I would just say to add into those sections or an electronic version, which we've all been using and it suffices perfectly well, and it just should be reflected properly in the procedure bylaw.
Sure, I'll second that. Not seeing any comments on that amendment. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask so we are at first reading with several amendments, and I'm going to call on our corporate officer to summarize the amendments that have been passed so that when we vote on first reading as amended, everyone is completely clear on what that actually is.
Okay, here's my skill testing question. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the amendments that have been noted thus far and been resolved and passed are that the Committee of the Whole public input period time be increased to 5 minutes per speaker, that the number of speakers during the public input period at the Committee of the Whole be 6 speakers, and noted the additional amendment that they are only able to speak 1 time. The amendment that a priority be given to residents and taxpayers of the community for the public input period, and then secondarily to those others that are present. And then that question period be limited to 3 questions per person at council meetings. That electronic participation options be available for Committee of the Whole meetings. And that printed copies, that there be a section added to 35, 35, and 36, that electronic versions be available in addition to printed copies.
Thank you. Are there any questions, feedback, comments? Seeing none. So can I call the question on, so first reading as amended with the several amendments that have been read out on the motion, all in favor? None opposed, carried. And would somebody like to make second reading as amended? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Council Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 5082, 2023 be read a second time.
Moved and seconded, and just clarifying that we don't have to then note as amended. It's wonderful. Okay, then on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Council Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 5082, 2023 be read a third time.
Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, great work, everyone. So item number 3 here, and I'm not sure why it's separate. Maybe we could have clarification on that. Oh, sorry, no, this is development procedures. So development procedures bylaw 5076, 2023. And this is final adoption. Are there any questions of this before we read it? Seeing none, Councillor Mealy, would you like to read it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the City of Port Alberni Development Procedures Bylaw number 5076, 2023 be now finally adopted, signed by the Mayor and Corporate Officer, and numbered 5076.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Douglas. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to item number 4, proposed zoning bylaw amendments for 2244 Mallory Drive. And this is a final reading as well. Councillor Patola, would you like to read?
Madam Mayor, I move the zoning map amendment number 56, 2244 Mallory Drive, Saywell Developments, bylaw number 5066, be now finally adopted, signed by the Mayor and Corporate Officer, and numbered 5066.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 5, which is for the property right next door, Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the zoning map amendment number 57, 2272 Mallory Drive, Saywell Developments, bylaw number 5067, be now finally adopted, signed by the Mayor and Corporate Officer, and numbered 5067.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Douglas. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And correspondence for action, we have 2 items. First is a letter dated April 22nd, 2023 from the Alberni Valley Pride Society requesting that the Pride flag be flown at City Hall during Pride Week. Would somebody like to make that motion? Moved by Councillor Douglas. Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments? Councillor Douglas?
I'd like to make a motion that council authorize the Alberni Valley Pride Society requests that City Hall fly the Pride flag during Pride Week at City Hall during Pride Week.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Mealy.
I think I messed that up a bit. You got the idea?
We got the idea. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item number 2, we have an email received May 3rd, 2023 from Valley Street Rods Car Club requesting the use of the parking area at Harbor Quay. Would somebody like to read that motion? Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that council authorize the Valley Streets Rod Car Club to use the use of the parking area at the Harbor Quay for the purpose of car show event on Sunday, August 13, 2023, from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m., subject to the notification of emergency services and BC Transit, consultation with all affected businesses and residents, implementation of traffic plan, and provisions of standard liability insurance in the amount of $5 million minimum.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. No proclamations, so we'll move on to correspondence for information. We have the correspondence summary and Union or UBCM Council 2023 AVICC resolution endorsement. Any comments on this? It's just included for information. Okay, seeing no comments. No report from in camera today. Moving on to council reports. Are there any items councillors would like to highlight or speak to? Okay. Did you put your hand up? No. Okay. Then that council reports be received. I'll make that motion. Seconded by Councillor Mealy. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. None opposed. New business. Item number 1, Code of Conduct Policy. Let's see. Councillor Haggard, would you read this first, and then we could have discussion?
I'd like to move that council approve the City of Port Alberni Council Code of Conduct Policy 3002-1.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any comments on this? Okay, seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 2, liquor license application policy. And I will go to our planner for this, our Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So staff have worked to develop and update a policy in coordination with the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch as we deal with liquor license and those types of things. We have a current policy that's a bit outdated, and so this policy is looking to update and help lead us forward as we deal with these different liquor license applications. And myself or our Planner 1, Haley, could probably answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Are there questions? Okay. Seeing none, would somebody like to read the first motion? Councillor Dame?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I lost my spot here. I guess I should. The fourth page. M2. Okay, got it. I would like to move that Council rescind the existing liquor license application policy approved June 25th, 2013.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments on this? Seeing none, on the motion, all in favor? Carried.
I would also like to move that Council approve the City of Port Alberni liquor license application policy 3006-1.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Douglas. Any comments on the policy? Seeing none, on the motion. Oh,
I just wanted to thank Haley, our Planner 1, for this work. She's been helping us through with this policy, and she will help us as we look through our, our work that we're doing for patios on public property. So that will come forward to a council meeting in the future.
thank you. And it is always nice just to have, these policies updated and looked at to make sure they are still relevant. So I appreciate that work, Haley. Okay. On the motion, seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Okay, and item number 3 is the BC Transit Annual Operating Agreement. And we'll go to our Director of Finance for this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So annually, the city and BC Transit enter into an agreement for the transit service within the city boundaries. This is the agreement that is in the financial plan, and everything's been considered, so we're just looking to execute that today.
Great. Are there questions or comments from council? Okay, Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the BC Transit 2023-2024 annual operating agreement between the City of Port Alberni and British Columbia Transit as attached to this report and in effect from April 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2024.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. I do just want to note that there are conversations going on at the regional district right now regarding transit, and just want to encourage members of the public to come to either council or the regional district and speak to transit and how they could be involved in those conversations, because there's a regional transit study that will be happening, and I think we often look at transit as just a City of Port Alberni service, but there's lots of opportunities to make sure that people who live in the outlying areas of our community are able to get around as well. And of course, as we know, in the last couple of years, there's also been discussion about transit service to some of our community's most loved assets, like Sprout Lake. And I think that offering that service is highly valuable to people who may not have access to a vehicle, but may want to be able to enjoy the provincial park and the lake on hot days that we have in the summer. So that conversation did not get a lot of traction last time it came to our community, and I think that's partly because people were not aware that it was going on. So just want to encourage people to take part, send your comments either to council or the regional district, but transit is a really important service in our community. Seeing no other comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And that brings us to question period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council. Are there any? Come on forward.
I'm Monica Rose, and I'm from Port Alberni. And as everybody knows, I'm still quite new, and I enjoy coming here. because instead of being behind a computer, it's trying to still get used to the community. And the reason I came here is for the last part of my life before I disappear, I would like to do something positive and something good for Port Alberni. So my other half is knowledgeable about ocean issues, and so the port is the reason that has brought me here. How I'm going to serve the community, I don't know yet, but I am willing to volunteer, and I have lots of knowledge. I lived in 6 different countries, and I'm a very good planner, and I can give great inputs, and I'm a diplomat. So what I'm saying is that I truly enjoy coming here in front of you, mayor and councillors, and speak instead of behind a computer, because I have sent things through computer and not getting respond. And then you think, did it get there? And I really like to know what I'm saying, and you respond back to me, either yes or no. And so thank you for allowing to come up here and speak. And I like what you did, because I believe in democracy, and I don't like when they start getting too many rules, because then it becomes no more democracy to the citizens. So thank you very much. And I have one question. I do know that you had the SOMA's planning, and I would like to see what has come into the community. And are you going to show it to us? And can we vote or put input? And I would like to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. And our request for request for qualifiers process for the SOMAS lands, which I know you're aware of, I believe is just about to close. Maybe our CAO could speak to
Through the chair, it just closed on Friday with 2 applications, and administration is currently reviewing, and then we'll bring a report to council.
Thank you. So that will be coming forward. Council has not had an opportunity to review those yet, as it did just complete, of course.
Are we allowed to see them all as well and give input, or is it just the mayor and councillors?
CAO.
Through the chair, throughout the development process, there will be public input garnered, but it's for the development partner who we're working with. That was through an intended procurement process. And so we have guidelines that we're following to select the proper component to move forward with. So for that portion there, we will be making a recommendation based on administration and our consultants' recommendations to council. But then moving forward from there, I believe there will be public input taken.
Thank you very much. Are there other members of the public who would like to ask questions today?
Hi, again, my name is Joseph, and I am from Port Alberni. I hope I'm not stepping, because this has been voted on 3 times regarding the amendments to the procedures bylaws. I hope I can bring it up without stepping in the wrong direction or at the wrong time. Just a quick note, the agenda comes out on Thursday. We all get that, at least the public does. I think that's when we get to have a look at it. And from what I understand with the changes, there won't be the opportunity for input as council's making the decision on that vote, there won't be a chance for public input prior to. So that's one of the things I was concerned about. And but it does sound like prior to that, if you have a concern, it was mentioned, you can approach a council member, somebody that may allow you to then speak. That sounds like a tough one, if they allow you to speak. And so it's just with that in mind, those things that I've just mentioned, how would you feel if you were standing in the place of public to come and be involved and engaged? Would you feel more encouraged to come and be involved, or would that be a slight discouragement for you to come?
Thank you for your question, Joseph. And although I think it's somewhat rhetorical, I do just want to state that I think it's really important to remember that the bulk of our large decisions go through multiple meetings. And so there absolutely will be opportunity at question period, at committee of the whole, to submit a letter prior as well, to have that input. And while you certainly can approach a member of council to try to get them to let you speak during the meeting, I think that will be used on reasonably rare occasions. However, what frequently happens is a member of the public will say to one of us before, have you thought of this, or is this something that you've looked at? And then that member of council will ask that question during discussion. And I'm sure that's happened with some of your questions over time as well. And each of us as members of council are approachable and would welcome the opportunity to hear from you prior to a meeting and ask those questions if we can't answer them of you right away. So appreciate your input. And I mean, I know that you know this, but we are trying to make this as approachable of a process as possible, and certainly not trying to reduce the amount of input that people like yourself, especially people who come respectfully to every council meeting and provide positive input, not just positive, but positive in tone and how they ask the questions and provide input. We want to make sure we encourage that as much as possible. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to ask questions today? Okay, then with that, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Go Dogs, go.